You heard what they say about me, so why are you still here? Alpha King Alexander Reed stood beneath the silver moon crest of Reed Palace, his voice quieter than Emily Carter expected from a man who commanded an entire kingdom. The moon-choosing ceremony had ended only minutes earlier, yet the great hall already felt abandoned. Candles still burned along the marble columns. Winter roses remained scattered around the ceremonial platform. Beyond the towering doors, hundreds of departing guests carried the evening's newest scandal into every corridor of the palace. Emily stood several feet from Alexander in her simple gray infirmary dress, one hand curled around a folded white cloth she had forgotten she was holding. She knew exactly what he meant. Everyone had heard the rumor. It concerned something deeply private about the Alpha King, something repeated so often that people had stopped asking whether anyone could actually prove it. Emily had heard servants whisper about it. She had heard visiting nobles disguise their curiosity behind polite laughter. She had even heard someone claim that every woman who came close enough to Alexander eventually discovered the truth and ran. Tonight, Catherine Monroe had become the fourth. Yet standing before Alexander now, Emily did not see the frightening man those stories described. She saw a 36-year-old king in a black formal coat, tall and controlled beneath the weight of a crown he was not currently wearing. His dark hair was slightly disordered from a long evening. His silver-gray eyes remained fixed on her, guarded but searching. Most people would have called his expression cold. Emily recognized something else. Expectation. He expected her to leave too. I heard the rumors, she said. Alexander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That was not my question. Emily lifted her chin. Hearing a story about someone is not the same as knowing them. For one brief second, the Alpha King's composure slipped. Surprise crossed his face. Then footsteps sounded beyond the hall, and the moment shattered. 3 days earlier, Emily Carter had never spoken directly to Alexander Reed. At 25, she was an Omega with no noble family, no political influence, and no reason to believe the king even knew her name. She worked in the royal infirmary, where her mornings began before sunrise and usually ended long after the palace dining rooms went quiet. That morning, however, Reed Palace had awakened with unusual excitement. Carriages rolled through the iron gates before breakfast. Silver banners appeared along the balconies. Servants carried armfuls of winter roses toward the great hall. Another moon-choosing ceremony was approaching, and everyone seemed convinced Catherine Monroe would finally become Alexander's Luna. Emily watched from an infirmary window as Catherine stepped from a polished black carriage in a pale traveling dress. She was elegant, poised, and exactly the kind of woman the court expected beside an Alpha King. Alexander descended the palace steps to greet her. He bowed. Catherine smiled. From 50 feet away, everything looked perfect. Then Emily noticed an older man standing at a second-floor window above them. Councilor Marcus Whitmore did not watch Catherine. He watched Alexander. There was no celebration in his expression. A moment later, Marcus turned away from the glass and disappeared into the palace. Emily should have forgotten about it. Instead, something about the look on his face stayed with her. It was not the expression of a man wondering how the ceremony would end. It was the expression of a man who already knew. By the morning of the ceremony, Reed Palace had become a theater of expectation. Emily moved between the royal infirmary and the great hall carrying a small case of medical supplies, while visiting pack leaders filled the corridors with polished shoes, formal coats, and whispered predictions. Everyone seemed certain Catherine Monroe would succeed where 3 women before her had walked away. Emily was less certain. She had watched Catherine during the previous 2 days. Whenever Alexander entered a room, Catherine appeared calm. Whenever Councilor Marcus Whitmore approached her family, that calm disappeared. Near sunset, Emily crossed the eastern gallery and saw Marcus speaking quietly with Catherine's mother beside a tall window. Catherine stood between them, pale and silent. Marcus handed her mother a folded note. Emily kept walking, but one sentence reached her before she turned the corner. She deserves to know before she makes an irreversible choice. An hour later, the moon-choosing ceremony began. Hundreds of guests gathered beneath the silver banners of House Reed. Alexander stood alone at the center of the ceremonial floor in a black royal coat, composed beneath the enormous moon crest. Catherine entered wearing pale blue, and for several moments Emily thought perhaps everyone had been right. Catherine approached him. Alexander offered his hand. She almost took it. Then her mother stepped forward and whispered something near her ear. Catherine froze. Her gaze dropped to Alexander's hand, then lifted slowly to his face. Emily saw the exact instant fear replaced uncertainty. Alexander saw it too. His hand lowered. "Lady Catherine?" he asked. Catherine swallowed. "Your Majesty, I cannot continue." The silence was immediate. Somewhere behind Emily, someone whispered, "Not again." Another voice answered, "For women cannot all be wrong." Alexander remained motionless. "Is this your decision?" Catherine looked toward her mother. Marcus stood several yards behind them, his face perfectly calm. Catherine finally nodded. "Yes." Alexander's expression revealed nothing. "Then you are free to go." Catherine blinked, apparently expecting an argument. None came. Alexander stepped aside and gave her an unobstructed path from the ceremonial floor. She bowed quickly and walked toward her family. The moment she passed the first marble column, whispers spread through the hall. Emily heard fragments of the private rumor. Each version sounded more certain than the last, although nobody speaking claimed to have witnessed anything themselves. A few guests exchanged knowing looks. Others shook their heads as though Alexander's humiliation confirmed something they had believed all along. Emily looked at the king. He removed the ceremonial ring from his hand and placed it carefully on the table. Only then did his fingers tighten against the polished wood for one brief second. Pain, controlled almost before anyone could notice it. Emily noticed. So did Marcus. But while Emily felt an unexpected ache of sympathy, Marcus simply turned toward two council members and began speaking quietly. That bothered her more than the gossip. He was not surprised. He was already moving to whatever came next. As the guests began leaving, Emily carried her medical case toward the side corridor. Catherine passed close enough that their eyes met. There were tears in Catherine's eyes, but there was something else too. Regret. Emily hesitated. Before she could speak, Marcus appeared beside Catherine and guided her family toward the doors. He glanced once at Emily. The look lasted less than a second. It was enough. Later, when Emily returned to collect a forgotten cloth from the nearly empty Great Hall, Alexander was still there beneath the silver moon crest. Alone. He looked toward her and asked the question she had heard 3 days later in her memory before everything changed. "You heard what they say about me, so why are you still here?" Because hearing something about a person is not the same as knowing them. Emily's answer seemed to catch Alexander off guard. For a moment, the Alpha King simply watched her beneath the silver moon crest while the last sounds of departing carriages echoed beyond the palace doors. "Most people appear to believe otherwise," he said. Emily glanced toward the empty ceremonial platform. "Most people also repeat things they cannot prove." Something almost resembling amusement touched his expression, but it disappeared quickly. "You should be careful, Miss Carter. Defending me may become unpopular." Emily blinked. "You know my name?" "I know the names of the people who work in my home." Before she could respond, an advisor appeared at the doorway and quietly informed Alexander that the Moon Council required him. He gave Emily a restrained nod and left. By breakfast the next morning, the palace had turned Catherine's rejection into entertainment. Emily sat in the servants' dining room while attendants traded increasingly confident versions of the same private rumor. "For women," a young beta said, "at some point, you have to admit the stories must be true." Emily set down her coffee. "Why?" Several faces turned toward her. "Because 4 women left. That proves they left. It does not prove why." The beta smiled. "You are defending him again." "I am defending the difference between evidence and gossip." The table fell quiet. Emily stood and returned to the infirmary, unaware that Alexander had paused beyond the open archway long enough to hear her. Near noon, Catherine Monroe appeared at the infirmary door wearing a simple traveling dress. Her family was preparing to leave Reed Palace, but she looked as though she had not slept. "Miss Carter, may I speak with you?" Emily led her into a quiet supply room. Catherine closed the door behind them. "You looked at me differently last night." "How?" "Like you were wondering why I changed my mind." Emily hesitated, then chose honesty. "I was." Catherine stared at the floor. Emily asked the question that had troubled her since the ceremony. "What did Alexander actually do to make you afraid of him?" Catherine looked up immediately. "Nothing." Emily went still. "Nothing. He was respectful every time we met. He never pressured me. He never spoke to me cruelly. Catherine's voice weakened. That almost made leaving worse. Then why did you? Catherine folded her hands tightly. My mother received warnings before we arrived. They concerned the rumors everyone whispers about. She was told the information came from people who knew the previous candidates. Did you verify any of it? No. Catherine's cheeks colored with embarrassment. I was afraid to. Emily remembered Marcus handing Catherine's mother the folded note. Who sent the warnings? Catherine hesitated. Councilor Whitmore said he was protecting my family from making a mistake. The room seemed suddenly colder. Marcus? Catherine nodded. He told my mother the previous women had discovered enough to regret getting close to Alexander. Last night, just before I stepped forward, he insisted she remind me. Emily's heartbeat quickened. Do you believe him now? Catherine looked toward the window. I believe I rejected a man for something I never witnessed. Footsteps approached outside. Catherine opened the door. Quickly, before leaving, she turned back. There is one thing you should understand. Marcus did not sound like a man sharing a rumor. Emily waited. Catherine lowered her voice. He sounded like a man making sure the ceremony failed. Emily carried Catherine's final words with her for the rest of the afternoon. Marcus had not sounded like a man sharing a rumor. He had sounded like a man making sure the ceremony failed. She wanted to dismiss the thought as suspicion, but every detail returned with uncomfortable precision. Marcus watching Alexander from the second-floor window, the folded note given to Catherine's mother, his complete lack of surprise when Catherine refused the king. Near sunset, Emily was delivering a restorative tonic to the western wing when she noticed the royal library doors standing partly open. Alexander was inside alone, one hand resting against the long wooden table. His formal coat had been removed and folded over a chair. Without the ceremonial crowd surrounding him, he looked less like the Alpha King and more like a tired man who had spent too many hours pretending nothing could reach him. Emily knocked softly. Alexander looked up. Miss Carter, your advisor said you missed dinner. She placed the tonic on the table. The infirmary is becoming unusually interested in my eating habits. The infirmary prefers its patients conscious. A faint smile touched his mouth. Then it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Emily noticed his breathing change. His shoulders tightened. Are you feeling unwell? I am fine. That answer usually means the opposite. Alexander looked toward the rain beginning to streak the tall windows. The moon choosing rights can leave an alpha's wolf unsettled when the ceremony ends without a bond. It will pass. Emily remained where she was. Should I call the royal healer? No. Then sit down. His eyebrows lifted. Are you ordering the Alpha King to sit? I am asking a stubborn patient to make my job easier. This time his smile lasted a second longer. He lowered himself into the chair. Emily poured water and left the glass within his reach, careful not to crowd him. For several quiet minutes, rain tapped against the windows while his breathing gradually steadied. You defended me this morning, Alexander said. Emily looked at him. You heard that. Enough. Then you also heard that I was defending evidence, not you. A devastating distinction. She almost laughed. Alexander's expression softened, but when Emily stepped closer to check the untouched tonic, something changed. He went completely still. Emily stopped too. A strange warmth moved through her chest, subtle at first, then unmistakable. Her wolf, usually quiet beneath years of being treated as insignificant, suddenly became alert. Alexander rose slowly, his silver-gray eyes fixed on her with startled intensity. What is it? Emily asked. He took one careful step backward. The movement hurt more than she expected. Do not come closer. Why? Alexander inhaled, and whatever uncertainty remained disappeared from his face. He looked almost shaken by the certainty replacing it. Emily felt the same invisible pull between them, ancient and gentle, nothing like fear and nothing she could explain. Her heartbeat quickened. Alexander. It was the first time she had spoken his name. His eyes closed for a brief second. When they opened, the king was gone from his expression. Only the man remained, staring at the omega his wolf had recognized beyond doubt. One word escaped him, barely louder than the rain. Mate. The word seemed to remain suspended between them. Emily could hear the rain against the library windows and the distant ticking of the mantel clock, yet everything else had gone strangely quiet. Alexander stood several feet away, staring at her as though fate had just handed him the one thing he had stopped allowing himself to want. Emily felt the bond too. It was not a command or an overwhelming force. It was recognition, warm and steady, awakening something inside her wolf that had been silent for years. "Mate," she repeated softly. Alexander's expression tightened. Then he stepped backward again. The warmth inside Emily suddenly collided with an old familiar ache. "You do not want me." His eyes snapped toward hers. "That is not what this is." "Then stop moving away from me." Alexander looked toward the rain-darkened windows. "You work in my palace. You are an Omega. I am your king." Emily's chin lifted. "I know exactly who we are." "Then you know what happens if anyone learns about this tonight. They will talk. They will do more than talk." His voice remained controlled, but something vulnerable moved beneath it. "The council will call you my destined Luna before you have decided whether you even want to know me. Nobles will congratulate you. Servants will tell you how fortunate you are. People who ignored you yesterday will suddenly explain what your future should be." Emily said nothing. He was describing her world with uncomfortable accuracy. Alexander continued, "And if you hesitate, someone will ask how an Omega could possibly refuse an Alpha King." Emily's anger weakened, replaced by understanding. "So you are protecting me. I am protecting your right to choose. By deciding that distance is what I need." That stopped him. Emily took one step forward. Alexander did not retreat this time, but he did not reach for her either. "You cannot give me freedom by making every decision before I get to speak." His silver-gray eyes held hers. "I have watched 4 women stand in front of me and change the moment someone whispered a story into their ears. I will not watch you stay because another voice tells you that you must." Emily understood then. This was not shame. This was fear wearing the discipline of a king. "You think I will become the 5th?" Alexander's silence answered for him. Emily's chest tightened. "You are afraid I will leave. I am afraid you will stay for the wrong reason." The honesty in his voice stripped away the last of her anger. She glanced toward the space between them. "And what would the right reason be?" Alexander answered without hesitation. "You." Emily looked back at him. "Not the bond. No. Not the crown. Never." His voice softened. "If you stay because I am your king, that is obedience. If you stay because the bond tells you to, that is destiny. I need to know what you choose when neither one is allowed to speak for you." Emily felt her wolf settle, not disappointed, but strangely calm. She moved toward the library door. Alexander's face changed, though he made no attempt to stop her. His restraint hurt almost as much as being rejected would have. Emily rested her hand on the door handle and looked back. "Then give me time to choose." Alexander nodded once. "As much as you need." She opened the door. "But understand something, Alexander. If you keep expecting me to leave, eventually you may push me so far away that I cannot find my way back." For the first time that evening, fear appeared openly in the Alpha King's eyes. Emily packed before sunrise. She told herself the decision was temporary, but the small traveling case on her bed made it feel painfully final. 2 gray work dresses, a winter coat, her medical notebook, and the few personal belongings she had collected during 3 years at Reed Palace fit inside with room to spare. 12 miles south, a village infirmary had offered her a position months ago. Until now, she had never seriously considered it. Distance suddenly seemed like the only place where she might hear her own thoughts. A knock sounded at the door. Emily froze. She knew who stood outside before she opened it. Alexander had come alone, dressed simply in a dark vest and white shirt rather than royal formal wear. His gaze moved immediately to the case. "You are leaving." "I am considering it." "Because of last night." Emily folded her arms. "Because I asked for time, and every hallway in this palace reminds me that I am an Omega whose mate happens to be the Alpha King." Alexander absorbed the words without defending himself. "Then I will make certain nobody interferes with your departure." The answer hurt more than she expected. "There. You are doing it again." His brow tightened. "Doing what?" "Choosing the ending before I have." Alexander stepped inside only after she moved aside. "Emily, I am trying to respect what you asked for. Respecting my choice is not the same as assuming I will leave." Silence filled the little room. Emily looked directly at him. "You are so afraid I will reject you that you are rejecting me first." Alexander's composure finally cracked. He turned toward the narrow window, where pale morning light touched the palace roofs. "For times," he said quietly, "for times I stood in that hall believing I could remain indifferent to the answer. For times someone looked at me differently after hearing the same whispers." He paused. Eventually, I stopped fearing loneliness. I started fearing hope. Emily's anger softened. She understood the sentence too well. And now, Alexander looked back at her. Now fate has placed the one person who questioned those whispers in front of me, and I am terrified that if I reach for her, she will wonder whether she ever had the right to step away. Emily crossed the room until only a few feet separated them. Then ask me. Do not command me. Do not decide for me. Ask. Alexander's breathing slowed. Will you stay today? No royal authority entered the question. Emily glanced at her traveling case, then returned her eyes to his. Today, yes. Relief moved across his face so openly that she almost smiled. Tomorrow is still mine, she added. Every tomorrow is yours. Before Emily could answer, hurried footsteps approached. A royal messenger appeared at the open doorway, visibly uneasy. Your Majesty, the Moon Council has called an emergency hearing. Alexander's expression sharpened. For what reason? The royal bond provision. Emily looked between them. The messenger continued. Councilor Whitmore argues that 4 failed courtships demonstrate an unstable succession. He is requesting temporary council authority over royal appointments until the throne secures a recognized Luna. Alexander became completely still. When is the hearing? Tomorrow morning. Emily felt Catherine's warning return with sudden clarity. Marcus had not merely wanted the ceremony to fail. He needed Alexander to remain alone. Alexander looked toward the packed case on Emily's bed, then back at the messenger. For years, women had walked away from the Alpha King. Now Emily finally understood why someone had worked so hard to make sure they did. Emily did not unpack the traveling case. She left it closed beneath the window, a quiet reminder that staying for one day was still a choice, not a surrender. By evening, Reed Palace had changed. Council messengers crossed the corridors carrying sealed documents. Senior pack leaders arrived without ceremony, and every conversation seemed to stop when Alexander passed. Emily understood what Marcus had accomplished. For rejected courtships had once looked like private disappointments. Tomorrow, he intended to turn them into political evidence. Shortly after sunset, another carriage entered the palace courtyard. Emily recognized Catherine Monroe before the driver opened the door. Catherine stepped out holding a worn leather document case against her chest. She refused the servant who offered to carry it and went directly to the infirmary. I almost kept going, Catherine admitted when Emily brought her into the quiet supply room. My family wanted me home before the hearing. Why did you come back? Catherine placed the case on the table. Because I found these. Inside were several letters bearing Marcus Whitmore's personal seal. Emily unfolded the first carefully. It had been sent to Catherine's mother weeks before the ceremony and warned of unspecified private concerns surrounding Alexander. The language was cautious enough to sound responsible, yet certain enough to create fear. The second letter had been copied from correspondence sent to another family before an earlier courtship. Then came a third, a fourth, different recipients, nearly identical warnings. Emily looked up. He contacted all of them. Catherine nodded. My mother kept copies because she believed Marcus was protecting us. Emily studied the dates. Every warning came before a rejection. Did Marcus start the original rumor? I cannot prove that. Catherine's answer was immediate. The whispers existed before some of these letters, but he made them sound verified. He told each family that previous candidates had learned enough to be concerned. Emily understood the design. The first rumor created doubt. The first rejection made the rumor appear credible. Then that rejection became evidence used to frighten the next woman. Each departure strengthened the story without anyone ever proving it. He built certainty out of repetition, Emily whispered. Catherine's face tightened with regret. Including mine. Why? Emily asked, although she already suspected the answer. Catherine removed one final document. It contained an old council proposal written by Marcus concerning the royal bond provision. He had argued that prolonged uncertainty over succession justified transferring selected royal powers to the Moon Council. Emily stared at the page. He needed Alexander without a Luna. Yes. Catherine swallowed. Every failed ceremony moved him closer. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. The scandal had never truly been about Alexander's private life. That had only been the weapon Marcus knew people would repeat without demanding proof. Will you testify tomorrow? Emily asked. Fear crossed Catherine's face. Marcus was family, powerful and respected. standing against him, would follow her long after she left Reed Palace. Then Catherine straightened. I rejected Alexander because I trusted someone else's certainty more than my own experience. I will not make that mistake twice. The palace bell sounded in the distance. Emily closed the document case. Alexander had given her the freedom to walk away even when losing her frightened him. Marcus had taken other people's fear and quietly shaped their choices for them. The difference suddenly felt enormous. Emily looked toward the corridor leading to the council chambers. Tomorrow Marcus expected 4 absent women and 1 isolated king. Instead, one of those women had returned with evidence, and the Omega Marcus had never considered important enough to notice was carrying it. The Moon Council chamber was already full when Emily and Catherine entered the next morning. 12 council members sat beneath the silver crest while pack leaders crowded the galleries, their low conversations fading the moment Alexander appeared. He walked alone to the center of the chamber in his black royal coat, calm enough that no one would have guessed how much depended on the next hour. Marcus Whitmore stood opposite him with several documents arranged neatly across the council table. For formal courtships, Marcus began. For refusals, the kingdom cannot ignore a pattern that threatens stable succession. Emily watched Alexander's face. He did not react. Marcus continued. Under the royal bond provision, temporary oversight of selected royal appointments is both lawful and necessary until His Majesty secures a recognized Luna. Several council members nodded thoughtfully. Then Catherine stepped forward. Marcus turned, and for the first time, his confidence faltered. Catherine, you told my family that previous candidates had discovered reasons to fear Alexander. Marcus recovered quickly. I advised your mother to exercise reasonable caution. You presented rumors as though they had been verified. A murmur moved through the chamber. Catherine placed the first letter on the table. Emily followed with the others. One councilwoman examined the seals while another compared the dates. Marcus's expression hardened. Private correspondence proves only that I warned families before an irreversible commitment. Emily spoke before fear could silence her. Then why are the warnings nearly identical? Every face turned toward the Omega in the gray infirmary dress. Marcus looked at her as though noticing her for the first time. This proceeding concerns royal succession, Miss Carter. It concerns 4 women whose decisions you are using as evidence. Marcus gave a restrained smile. And what expertise does an infirmary Omega possess regarding affairs of the throne? Emily felt the old instinct to become invisible. She ignored it. None. The answer surprised him. But I know how evidence works. A conclusion does not become true because enough frightened people repeat it. Silence settled across the chamber. Emily looked toward the council members. How many of those women rejected the man they actually knew? No one answered. Catherine did. I did not. She faced Alexander. He never mistreated me. I never personally confirmed the private rumor. I rejected him because I was told other women already knew it was true. Emily placed Marcus's old proposal beside the letters, and every rejection made the next warning more convincing while bringing Councilor Whitmore closer to the political outcome he had already proposed. The councilwoman nearest the documents looked sharply at Marcus. Within minutes, the hearing changed direction. The challenge under the royal bond provision was suspended pending a formal review of the correspondence and Marcus's conduct. Pack leaders began whispering again, but Alexander barely seemed to hear them. His eyes were on Emily. When the council withdrew, he approached her slowly. You could have left. I know. Did the bond bring you back? Emily felt its quiet warmth between them, but the answer came easily. No. Alexander stopped. Then why? She stepped closer, leaving only a few feet between them. Because I watched you give Catherine the freedom to leave when humiliating you would have been easier to punish. Because you gave me the same freedom when losing me frightened you. His silver gray eyes softened. Emily held his gaze. Marcus tried to control people by making fear sound like truth. You did the opposite. You gave me a choice even when you hated what I might choose. Alexander barely breathed. And what did you choose? Emily's voice was quiet, but everyone nearest them heard it. I choose you. For several seconds, Alexander did not move. Around them, the Moon Council chamber remained filled with whispers, rustling papers, and stunned faces. But Emily saw only the man standing before her. You choose me, he repeated quietly, as though he needed to hear the words without a room full of witnesses. Emily nodded. I do. Something in his guarded expression finally gave way. Not triumph. Not possession. Relief. Alexander glanced toward the council members reviewing Marcus's correspondence, then back at Emily. There is still something I need to ask. He stepped into the center of the chamber beneath the silver moon crest. Emily followed, uncertain what he intended. Then the Alpha King lowered himself to one knee. The room became completely silent. Emily's breath caught. Alexander Reed, the man for women, had publicly refused. The king, whose private life had become entertainment for people who barely knew him, was kneeling before an Omega who had spent years being overlooked in his own palace. His silver-gray eyes never left hers. Emily Carter, fate recognized you before either of us understood what was happening. My wolf recognized you. The bond recognized you. But none of those things have the right to answer for you. Emily felt warmth gather behind her eyes. Alexander continued, I could announce you as my destined Luna and give the council the certainty it demands. I will not do that unless it is what you want. I am not asking as your king. I am asking as Alexander. His voice softened. Will you choose a life beside me? Emily remembered the traveling case still packed beneath her window. She remembered how little she owned and how easily she could have carried everything 12 miles south to another infirmary. She remembered Catherine's fear, Marcus's letters, and every moment Alexander had stepped backward when his own heart wanted him to move closer. Most of all, she remembered that he had opened the door and trusted her with the freedom to walk through it. Emily extended her hand. Yes. Alexander remained still. She smiled through the emotion tightening her throat. I choose you freely. Today, tomorrow, and every day that choice remains ours to make. Only then did Alexander take her hand. He rose slowly until they stood at the same level beneath the moon crest. Catherine smiled from beside the council table. Several pack leaders lowered their heads in respect. Across the chamber, Marcus said nothing as the evidence against him was formally secured for investigation. The private rumor that had followed Alexander for years had never been proven by any of the women who rejected him. Repetition had made it sound like truth, but repetition had never made it evidence. In the weeks that followed, Emily did not abandon the infirmary or suddenly become someone else because the kingdom called her a future Luna. She continued helping patients while learning the responsibilities of the royal court on her own terms. Alexander never asked her to become smaller for his crown, and Emily never asked him to pretend the years of rejection had left no scars. Her traveling case remained beneath her window, unpacked but visible, because she wanted to remember something important. She had stayed because she had been free to leave. Alexander had spent years believing love would arrive. Only when someone stopped rejecting him. Emily taught him something different. Love arrived when neither person was forced to stay. Destiny had introduced an Alpha King and an overlooked Omega, but respect gave them a future. And sometimes the greatest proof of strength is not holding someone tighter. It is opening your hand and trusting them to choose it. If this story reminded you that love without freedom is not love at all, please like this video, share it with someone who believes truth can overcome rumors, and subscribe to the channel for more stories of courage, destiny, second chances, and unexpected love.